All right, everybody, hello and welcome. Happy Sunday. Hopefully everybody had a great week out there. This is going to be the Q&A class. This is your extra kind of bonus class, if you want to call it that. And what we're going to be doing today is we will be covering the top missed private pilot test questions that we've been seeing people miss in our school here. And I basically queued those questions up. You guys will have an opportunity to answer those questions in real time with our polls. So welcome, everybody. I know we've got some folks on YouTube as well, Elijah and Jordy. You're more than welcome to scooter over to the website. So it's checkride-prep.com. And when you log into the website, it is the Saturday Q&A class under the private pilot, the free instrument private pilot. The link I think that we put up there does not actually correspond to the correct Vimeo, or Vimeo does not allow you to transfer it over. So apologize about that. Other than that, what we'll also be doing is if you have any questions, whether it's regarding the private pilot course or anything else along the lines, the UAV, commercial, or instrument classes, feel free to chime in and we'll see if we can answer those. If you do have specific questions or test questions that you keep missing, feel free to, if you can give me the entire question and the potential answers, we can go through them. It does not work necessarily if you say that it's on test number 3 and it's question 27, because our questions are actually randomized. So you might see something on question 27 and I might see a different question along the way as well. So good evening, everybody. As I mentioned, let's go ahead and get started. And like I said, I don't want to take up too much of your time today. We'll kind of go through what we're going to be covering first. So as I mentioned, for this Sunday, the 6th of December, we'll be talking about any course updates. For those that were asking, they were asking a reminder of what the homework is for tomorrow's class, so I've got a slide for that. We'll be covering the top test questions that are missed in the private pilot course, and in addition to that, we will open it up for any type of discussion. It can be anything course related or aviation related at the very end of class as well. For those of you that are having problems in the class, let's say you're falling behind or anything else along those lines, you can follow that link there. And what we've done with a lot of students is we basically provided like a free 20-minute one-on-one, either to help people kind of get reoriented or trying to put together a game plan so they can finish the course. Or just general career questions. So if you want to, you're more than welcome to use that link. It's also in the YouTube page in the description section. And it's just making sure nobody falls behind at that point in time. So you're more than welcome to use it. It's also located on our Facebook page, and it's helped a lot of students in the past. So I think we did about 150 of them last month, and we'll continue doing them as long as we see students kind of striving and pushing themselves forward. Now, the homework for tomorrow, which is going to be December 7th, Pearl Harbor Day. We have class number 4 for the private pilot online ground school. It is a free ground school. And what we're going to be doing tomorrow is we will be picking up with a couple things that we kind of fell short on time in terms of last week. So last Friday, we were covering airspace, and the airspace section, we got through all of the different types of airspace, but we ran out of time when we started covering special use airspace. So we will cover special use airspace, and then we'll move into the bulk of our discussion, which is going to be federal aviation regulations. If you do have the private pilot book from Rod Machado, it is going to be chapter number 6. If you don't have the private pilot book, you can check the federal aviation regulations. They are free online, or if you have a FAR AIM, we'll basically be covering the following sets. So part 1, we're going to be talking about a few different definitions, such as sunset, sunrise, twilight, and so forth. Part 61, we'll be talking about pilot licensing. So this will include everything from, how do you get your medical, to, what are the licensing requirements to become a private pilot? What are your privileges and limitations as a student pilot, and then also a private pilot? And then we'll start moving on to the general operating rules, which is part 91, in terms of everything we can and can't do as pilots once we're in the air. Okay. So, as we said before, welcome everybody. And Marika, welcome over there on YouTube. So, like I said, for those on YouTube that don't necessarily have access to the vote button, when we do bring up the test questions, just write them on a piece of paper and we'll go over them in a few seconds after that fact. That way it'll just give everybody an opportunity to basically fairly answer the questions and see where everybody is in the class. Usually the questions that I pull, though, surprisingly enough, because you guys are the superstars that show up on your day off in terms of a Sunday, sometimes you guys actually do better in these questions than the entire class. So it definitely does show. All right, so what we're going to do is we'll start off with the test questions, with the private pilot test questions. And the first one that I actually went over in class and a lot of people missed during their actual test is dealing with basically in a spin, which wing is stalled. So during a spin to the left, which wing or wings are stalled? Is it both wings are stalled, neither wing is stalled, or only the left wing is stalled? And in case anybody is on the website and you're trying to figure out where the vote button is, I'll show you just briefly. So kind of scoot over here. If you go to the chat, you can kind of go down on the very, very bottom of the chat there. And as you can see, once a topic basically becomes available, it says vote. So if you go ahead and click on that vote button, it'll open up whichever option that you want. And then if you click one of them, it will then say waiting for final results. So that's how you do it instead of putting it in the chat. And then once we basically close the voting, then we'll be able to go over and review that test question for you. So let me go ahead and throw that question back up. For those on YouTube, just write it down on a piece of paper for right now. All right, everybody, looks like everybody's got their answer in. So I'm going to go ahead and review the results here. So like I said, we've got about 90% of the class with the correct answer. So great job, everybody. We did have this one in class as well. So this one is actually, the correct answer is actually going to be A. It's going to be both wings are stalled. So remember that at the end of the day, anytime that we are in a spin, both wings are stalled. But there's actually going to be one wing which is slightly stalled more than another, and that's the reason why it'll spin either to the right or to the left. But at the end of the day, both are stalled, okay? So a couple people did answer B, and a couple people answered C. B is actually incorrect because both wings must be stalled through a spin. You can't have a spin unless both wings are stalled. And then that's the same thing with C. So in that case, best answer and correct answer is going to be A. All right, good job, everybody. All right, let's go ahead and push on. For internal cooling, reciprocating aircraft engines are especially dependent upon, is it A, functioning thermostat, B, air flowing over the exhaust manifold, or C, the circulation of lubricating oil? Yeah, Jordy, don't second guess yourself. Sometimes if you do that, you could potentially put down the correct answer and then you kind of talk yourself or walk yourself out of that correct answer into a wrong one. Give everyone another 10 seconds here. All right, almost everybody's got their answer in. All right, so let's go ahead and close it out and see how well everybody did here. So like I said, we've got about 86% of the class with the correct answer. Nobody answered A, which is good. So the other folks basically answered B, but correct answer is actually the circulation of lubricating oil. Air flowing over the exhaust manifold. Keep in mind, that's the exhaust portion of it. So that's basically where the exhaust is being ejected out from the actual engine, and it's not going to have any... It's really not going to do anything for internal cooling, okay? So remember, going back through the oil system itself, and keep in mind, this is an older slide, but the way that these are actually organized is this is number 1 and this is number 2. So the first purpose of the oil is actually to help regulate temperatures by carrying away heat from the engine to keep the engine temperatures within limits. That's the primary purpose of the oil system. The secondary purpose is for lubrication, which means that it's just creating that thin film, which allows those metal surfaces to basically slide over each other with minimal contact. Okay, so for the oil system, the primary purpose, once again, is to help regulate temperature by carrying away heat from the actual engine itself. Okay, all right, good job, everybody. All right, so I'm going to see if I can do this moving forward. So what I'll do is let's go ahead and take a look at the next FAA test question. Now with this test question, the test question is going to have a figure associated with it. And what we're looking for is referring to figure number 3. The question is which altimeter will indicate more than 10,000 feet? And our options are 1, 2, and 3, 1 and 2, or just 1 only, okay? So let me go ahead and show you that test figure. I will do a little timer here so that way we can keep track of it all. And the poll is open. And remember, I'll write down the options on the screen as well. So your options are, it's going to be A, which is 1, 2, and 3. Option B is going to be 1 and 2. And option C is going to be number 1 only. Right, got another 20 seconds or so. No, but everybody's behaving. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the potential results here. And what we're going to do is, the question is effectively referring to which of these altimeters has an altimeter setting that's greater than 10,000 feet. So we covered this a couple days ago. I think it was last Wednesday. So if we look at these and we kind of determine what the numbers are, remember that I usually start off with a 10,000 foot hand here. So I am going to cheat a little bit and use a ruler in order to get these lines correctly. But there is the 10,000th foot hand right there. And you can see that 10,000th hand is actually very close to the 1, but it's actually a slightly little bit less. And then let's see here. Then we have 0 and then 5. Okay. So going back to the answers here, it looks like 22% of the class said A, which is 1, 2, and 3. 72% said B, which is 1 and 2, and 4% said only number 1. So looking at this, we've got 10,000. So in this case, this altimeter is actually 10,500 feet MSL. So this one would be 1. Looking at number 2 here, we'll start with a 10,000 foot hand. And if I draw that line from the 10,000 foot hand straight out, you can see it's at least above 10,000, but it's not quite to 20,000 as shown there because it's right between the 1 and the 2. So I know I've got 10,000 something. And then I'll look at the 1,000 foot hand, which is between the 4 and the 5. Okay, so there's 4,000. And then I've got the big hand, which is going down to the 500. So if you want to add those up, that's basically 14,500 MSL. So that one works as well. So far 1 and 2 are showing above 10,000 feet. Number 3, this one's a little bit trickier, and usually in class, most people will say that it's either 9,500 feet or 19,500 feet, and we'll talk about that here in a second. So looking at that 10,000 foot hand, I'll do the same thing. I'll basically draw a line straight up, and you can see it's pretty much touching the 1, if not, it's pretty close to touching that 1 for 10,000. And from that point, I'll go to the hundredths hand, or the thousandths hand that is, and go up, and you can see we are above 9, but not quite at 0, so we know we've got 9,000 there. And then the final one is going to be 500. Okay, so where most people get this wrong is they say that it's 19,500 just because of that 10,000 foot hand is touching the 1, and that's not the case. If it was actually 19,500, that 10,000ths hand would be more in this type of position. Okay, you see how it's it would be closer to the two, and it wouldn't actually be pointing to the 1 at all. So in this case, the correct answer here is actually 9,500. And 9,500 is not a match because we're looking for anything above 10,000. So the best answer, which the majority of the class has, is actually going to be B. It is going to be altimeter number 1 and altimeter number 2 show 10,000 feet and above. Okay, good job, everybody. All right, so moving on, what we're going to do is we are going to take a look at wake turbulence avoidance, which is something that we've also kind of messed up on. I think a few people were kind of confusing it or basically doing something backwards a little bit. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and bring up the FAA test question here, and it goes as follows. When landing behind a large aircraft, the pilot should avoid wake turbulence by staying, is it A, above the large aircraft's final approach path and landing beyond the large aircraft's touchdown point, B, below the large aircraft's final approach path and landing before the large aircraft's touchdown point, or C, above the large aircraft's final approach path and landing before the large aircraft's touchdown point? Okay, I'll give everyone like 90 seconds for that one as well. And Matthew on YouTube, yeah, I'm glad you found that the course companion guide was useful for the private pilot. It took us a long time to put that together, so it's in the works for the instrument pilot, but it's something that will probably be next year. Unfortunately, I wish it would be done sooner rather than later, but it is, that private pilot guide is almost, I think, what, 600 pages? All right, got about 30 seconds left. All right, everybody, so let's see how we did as a class. I'm going to go ahead and publish the results, and we've got 90% of the students with the correct answers. I think what ends up happening is sometimes people look at the very wordy questions and then, you know, we kind of have a brain fart or we just want the simplest way out, and we don't really want to read the entire set of sections. And this happens a lot with the flight planning ones where they're asking you to use an E6B. I myself used to skip those questions all the time to the very, very end. But Correct answer is above the large aircraft's final approach path and landing beyond the large aircraft's touchdown point. We had nobody with B and a handful of people with C there, so let's just review that really quickly. All right, so avoiding wake turbulence. We talked about wake turbulence. Wake turbulence is something that can definitely cause some issues with our smaller aircraft. And when we're looking at wake turbulence, following any aircraft of any size is going to create wake turbulence anytime it creates lift. The larger the aircraft, the heavier the aircraft, the slower the aircraft, and the dirtier the configuration, meaning or the cleaner the configuration, the worse the wake turbulence is going to be. Now, anytime that you're looking at where wake turbulence could potentially be, keep in mind that it will usually descend at 500 to 1,000 feet per minute, and it can basically last for several minutes. It depends on what's going on in the atmosphere and where the winds are actually blowing the wake turbulence. But for the purposes of this question, if we are, let's do the one for touchdown first. If we are following this aircraft in to land, then we can see the touchdown point here is going to be here. So what we want to do is basically land beyond the point where they touch down. Okay. In this point, if this is their rotation point, then what we want to do is rotate and basically stay above the path of that heavier aircraft at that point. Okay, so it basically makes a V if you were to kind of draw it out. So kind of looking at it like that, you're going to touch down beyond the point where they actually touch down, and you will rotate prior to the point that they take off. Now, a lot of times they will have a much more aggressive climb rate than a small aircraft. And the reality is that you will probably look something like this, meaning that even if you rotated before, your path will probably cross into that wake. So what you can do, especially at the bigger or busier airports like Long Beach or John Wayne, a lot of times they're going to give you an early turnout. So instead of maybe 500 feet, they may give you a turnout 300 feet. So that way you can basically go a different direction rather than entering the wake of that larger aircraft as well. Okay. Also keep in mind that if there are parallel runways and there's a large aircraft taking off on the parallel runway, that wake has the potential to blow over to your runway. So always use caution with that as well. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and move on, and we'll do the next FAA test question here. So with that, this is going to be dealing with our weather requirements that we talked about the other day. So we'll see how well you do on this. And we're going to go ahead and look at this map, and I'll show you where Sandpoint Airport is. The visibility and cloud clearance requirements to operate VFR during daylight hours over Sandpoint Airport are at 1,200 feet are going to be what? And you've got a series of potential answers here. So let's go ahead and take a look at the actual FAA chart. Now, I blew it up as large as I possibly could make it. Keep in mind, if I go any larger on the FAA charts, they actually start to get pixelated. I also put a copy of the FAA testing supplement on the YouTube page for you guys out there. You can always find test number or figure number 22 and zoom in to your heart's content. But this is what it looks like. And what we have for, and I'm not going to bring up the test question yet, but this is the airport. So this is Sandpoint Airport. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. I'll go ahead. And so basically the conditions is they want to know what are the VFR weather requirements, and I'm going to abbreviate weather with WX, at 1,200 feet AGL above that airport, and it happens to be during the day. Okay, so that's basically what they're looking for. Our options, once again, is we've got A, which is effectively going to be 1 statute mile, and then we've got 1,000 feet above, and then we've got 500 below, BLO, and 2,000 feet horizontally. Okay, so that's option A. Option B is 1 statute mile clear of clouds. And option C is 3 statute miles, 1,000 above, and it's going to be 500 below, and then 2,000 feet horizontally, if you can read my writing, everybody. All right, so first step, like I said, is when we were practicing the airspace is always try to figure out if you can identify what is the airspace before you get into the weather requirements and do it step by step. So with that, I'll give everyone another 60 seconds here or so. Yep, where is that where is that weather triangle? Exactly. Yeah, Kodiaks are pretty cool, Steve. So the way that this is being asked is this is more of a practical question, right? Instead of me just saying, well, what is the weather requirements for class Bravo during the day? Or what are the weather requirements for class Golf at night? This is more in line of what you're going to see during your check ride. So it's important to have, these are more scenario based where look at the map. We're going to give you certain conditions and you're going to tell us what are the weather requirements going in and out of that airport. All right, got a few more people figuring that out there. So while we're waiting for people to figure that out, what is the airspace of that airport? You can throw it in the chat. What is the airspace of Sandpoint Airport if you're standing at the airport on the ground? A, B, C, D, E, or G? Right, so we've got some people say echo, some people say golf. One person said delta. A lot of echo and golf here. All right, so that's kind of the first step, right? So if you think about it, if we look at Sandpoint Airport, and that's kind of the first step of trying to figure out what's going on. So Sandpoint Airport is located right there where that red dot is, okay? So Sandpoint Airport itself is a class Golf airport up to a certain level. And you can see that there is this magenta shade basically surrounding this airport, and that magenta shade is representing that class Echo starts at 700 feet AGL, okay? So what that's telling us is that we basically have the actual airport itself, and within that airport environment, it is up to 700 feet AGL. This is all class Golf, okay? Then everything above 700 feet all the way up to 17,999 feet MSL is going to be class Echo. And everything above that is class Alpha, okay? So the question is specifically asking you, and this is where you have to read the question carefully. A lot of people get it correct that it is a class Golf airport, but then they answer the question as if they're at the airport. And remember, the question is specifically saying, what is the weather requirements at, what are the weather requirements going to be at 1,200 feet? Okay, so at 1,200 feet AGL, what are the weather requirements, which happens to be in class Echo? So remember, going back to that weather triangle or that pyramid that I drew before, right? You have kind of the inside pyramid right here, and then we had a little bit of a cloud that kind of came across, and I think I'm drawing that upside down, but there was that cloud that came across. And the mnemonic that we used is below 10,000 feet, we're more likely to see 3 Cessna 152s. So that was 3 statute miles, 1,000 feet above, 500 feet below, and 2,000 feet horizontally. And that is the same whether it happens to be in this pyramid. It was basically going to be Charlie, Delta, and Echo. So Charlie, Delta, and Echo below 10,000 feet, it has all of the same weather requirements. Now, if I change that question just slightly, and I said, instead of being at 1,200 feet, let's assume that what is it going to be at the actual airport? Okay, so the airport is a class Golf airport. So a class Golf airport, then it's 1 statute mile of clear of clouds, which means if I change it, B would be the correct answer, all right? But going back to the original test question here, so it doesn't get too scribbly, looking at it, we know that at 1,200 feet, which is the main thing, at 1,200 feet, that is class echo airspace. So the main thing is it doesn't matter whether it's during the day or during the night, what are the weather requirements for class echo? That happens to be C, which is going to be 3 statute miles of visibility, 1,000 feet above, 500 feet below, and 2,000 feet horizontally from every cloud. So it's important that you read the question carefully and don't miss out on those. They will ask you them in both circumstances. Some will say will be at a specific airport, and some will be at a elevation or height above an airport. Okay? Good job, everybody. So we get about only 58% of the class. That seems to be one of the more challenging ones. So what we're going to do is we're going to move on back to aerodynamics, where we saw another test question that people are missing, which is the term of angle of attack. All right, so the term angle of attack is defined as the angle between the what? Is it A, the chord line of the airfoil and the direction of the relative wind? B, the airplane's longitudinal axis and that of the air striking the airfoil? Or C, the airplane's center line and the relative wind? Give everyone another 40 seconds here. All right, everybody. So what we've got is everybody's got the correct answer. Okay, so it seems like we don't have to actually go over this. This is one that I saw almost 50% of the class miss. Maybe it was just because it was late at night, but remember the term angle of attack is going to be A. It's the chord line of the airfoil and the direction of the relative wind that hits it. So remember, going back to the actual, or taking a look at the different parts of a wing itself, the different parts of a wing are going to be composed of the following. So we have the lower camber, which is the lower portion of the wing, the upper camber, which is the upper portion of the wing, and then what we have is we've got the leading edge in the front and the trailing edge in the back. And if we were to basically draw an imaginary line from the leading edge to the trailing edge in this case, and draw it basically forward of the wing there, just like that, then it is the angle between the relative wind. So whichever way the relative wind is basically hitting this aircraft, it's the angle of attack is basically the difference between the relative wind and the leading edge, or I'm sorry, not the leading edge, but the chord line. Okay. All right. Good job, everybody. That was pretty easy. All right, going back to cylinder head temperatures here, jumping around a little bit. Let's go ahead and test your knowledge on this one. So I'm going to go ahead and close that out, and I'll open up the next one here for you. Which would most likely cause the cylinder head temperature and engine oil temperature gauge to exceed their normal operating ranges? Is it going to be A, using fuel that has a lower than specified fuel rating, B, using fuel that has a higher than specified fuel rating, or C, operating with higher than normal oil pressure? Naj, you can answer on a piece of paper for right now. If you're on YouTube, just answer on a piece of paper. Otherwise, you can scooter over to our website, and there's a poll on the actual website itself. For SXF, you're asking the angle of incident. Is it just a matter of airplane design? It is just a matter of airplane design. So remember that any time that we're looking at a fixed wing aircraft, there is something called an angle of incidence, which is, we sometimes refer to this as a mounting angle, and that's the angle between the chord line of the wing, where the wing is mounted to the fuselage, and then a reference axis along the fuselage, and that's generally going to be the longitudinal axis. Yeah, so it's not something that we usually calculate. It's usually going to be something that's determined by the manufacturer, but on average, I believe they're around 6 degrees or so. Oh, hold on. I'll make sure that it's up for you guys. There you go. Sorry. It's up now. You're welcome, SXF, Sierra X-Ray Foxtrot. Six more test questions, then we're out of here, everybody. So trying to do it in an hour just to save your weekend. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at it here. So publishing the results, we had about only 56% of the class with the correct answer here. So we'll review it. All right, so looking at this, the correct answer is actually going to be A, and it's using fuel that has a lower than specified fuel rating. Remember, that's one of them that will cause excessively high engine temperatures. So there's a couple things. If you have an excessively high engine temperature, which is going to obviously give you higher than normal cylinder head temperatures, and remember, we just call these CHTs, then it could be a result of either insufficient cooling due to either too lean of a mixture, too low of a grade of fuel, low oil, or insufficient airflow over the engine. Okay, so looking at the potential answers, we had 16% that answered B and 28% that answered C. So B is incorrect because a higher octane fuel will burn at lower temperatures and it'll actually keep the engine cooler. And remember that if our airplane is rated, let's assume our airplane had a rating of 80, okay? Well, we could then we can't use lower grade fuel, but we could use higher grade fuel such as 100 or 100 low lead. You just can't work your way backwards. That doesn't work because you'll get detonation and then also some other issues. Now, C is incorrect because operating with higher than normal oil pressure, it's not going to cause higher engine temperatures in that circumstance. So the correct answer there is A. So good job for those that got that. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the next one, which is dealing with the magnetos, and saw a bunch of people miss this one as well. All right, so actually we're going to do flaps and then we're going to do magnetos. So one of the main functions of flaps during an approach and landing is to do what? I'll go ahead and open up the test question here. Is it A, decrease the angle of descent without increasing the airspeed? B, permit a touchdown at a higher indicated airspeed? Or C, increase the angle of a descent without increasing the airspeed? Yeah, honestly, I have never seen 80 sold anywhere. I'm sure they're probably at little airports. I don't know. I usually always see 100 low lead. I don't even think I've seen 100 basically leaded. All right, 20 seconds, everybody. Compton used to sell well. That's Compton. Doesn't surprise me there. Yeah, Vic, if you click the wrong answer, unfortunately, you're stuck with it. You're committed for life in this case. So on the FAA test, you're allowed to switch your answers, though. All right, so taking a look at this, one of the main functions of flaps, we only surprisingly have 76% of the class with the correct answer here. If we think about the main thing that flaps do is they're going to increase the angle of descent without increasing airspeed. We had about 19% of the class answer A. So remember that flaps, at the end of the day, flaps are going to increase drag and they allow us, the pilot, to make a steeper approach without increasing airspeed. For those that answered A is incorrect because remember that when we extend our flaps, we're effectively creating a lot more drag, okay? So that drag is going to allow us to make that steeper descent without increasing airspeed, and that's the reason why A is incorrect here, because it's decrease the angle instead of increase the angle, so that doesn't work there. For those that answered B is incorrect because flaps increase the lift at slow airspeed, so which permits touchdown at a lower indicated airspeed. So it's not a higher one, but it should be lower if you have the statement correct. But correct answer here is going to be C. So good job, everybody. All right, so let's get on to that Magneto question that I was asking about before. And we've got, I think, 4 more after this. All right, so if the ground wire between the Magneto and the ignition switch becomes disconnected, the most noticeable result will be that the engine does what? Is it A, will run very rough, B, cannot be started with the switch in the on position, or C, cannot be shut down by turning the switch to the off position? Awesome job, Mark. Congratulations on passing your written there, sir. Was it for the private pilot or one of the other ones? Private, awesome. Congratulations again, Mark, for passing the written. All right, everybody. So most everybody has their answer in. I'll go ahead and publish the results. 85% of the class with the correct answer. So good job, everybody. What are going to be C? It's cannot be shut down by turning the switch to the off position. So remember that that is called a P lead when we're looking at it. And if the P lead is not grounded correctly, then what will end up happening is you'll have a couple different things. I'll show you here from the slide that we used in class. So remember, when we are doing the run up and those types of things, the very, very last thing that we do at the end of a flight, some instructors do it, some do not. But if we were to move that key from to the off position for basically a half a second, if the engine continues running, then we obviously have a bad P lead, and that means that it's just not grounded and it will basically continue to run. What normally happens is that you move it from both to off, and then you should start to hear the engine stop at that point, and then you can move it as quickly as possible back to the both position, so that way it doesn't kill the engine at the end of the day. Okay. So that P lead, which is also the ground wire, which is between the magneto and the ignition switch, becomes disconnected, the primary current cannot be directed to the ground, and the engine cannot be shut down by turning the switch to the off position. Now, even if this were to happen, obviously we can always kill the engine by pulling the mixture to idle, and we'll just starve the engine of fuel at that point. All right, the next one that I'm seeing a lot of people miss is dealing with the compass errors, and after this we got 3 more, then we're out of here. All right, so compass errors. This is dealing with the compass in the northern hemisphere only. So in the northern hemisphere, a magnetic compass will normally indicate a turn north if what? Is it A, the aircraft is decelerated while on an east or west heading, B, an aircraft is accelerated while on an east or west heading, or C, a left turn is entered from a west heading? Not sure why red. They're different from the FAA or the Kings. Keep in mind the FAA stopped releasing their testing database in 2000 or 2001. So what we do is we put together the FAA test questions, and we basically use our, the best ones that we can put together. Most of the schools use this one anyways. All right, give you guys another 30 seconds here. All right, everybody. So what we're going to do is most people have their answers in. We only have 65% of the class with the correct answer here. And a bunch of people answered 10% for A, 24% for C, and 65% with the correct answer. So let's go ahead and review it. I know a lot of people have problems with the compass errors, but the correct answer is actually going to be B. It's an aircraft is accelerated while on an east or west heading. And let's see here. The other percentage of class, folks, which is 24%, is going to be C. So a left turn is entered from a west heading. Okay. All right, so let's look at this, and I'll kind of jog your memory. But remember that with the compass errors, we use the term VD MONA. And VD MONA is basically all of the different compass errors that are potential or possible. So going down to the kind of the back end of that, which is going to be acceleration and deceleration errors, this is what we're specifically talking about. So if we look at it, if we are traveling, and this is most predominantly going to be displayed on the compass if you are heading either 090 or 270, so either on a westbound or an eastbound heading. So assuming that over here in the corner of the chart, this is going to be eastbound, and we've got basically an airplane over here traveling in this general direction, okay? So that airplane, if they were to accelerate, what will end up happening is it will show a momentary turn to the north, okay? So as that airplane starts to accelerate, it will appear happening is the fact that that airplane will appear to be showing a turn to the north, and then it will actually stabilize again back to that eastbound heading, okay? So that is basically the acceleration. On the flip side of that, if we decelerate and we have an aircraft that's on an east or westbound heading, it will show a momentary turn to the south. Keep in mind, north is at the top of the page, south is at the bottom of the page, and then it will stabilize again heading eastbound, and this is with the deceleration, okay? So that is one of just a handful of different compass errors that are out there. The acronym is ANS, accelerate north, decelerate south. So keep that in mind. And when we look at it, we will go over this again in class tomorrow, because I don't think we made it all the way through the compass errors. But the acronym that we always use is VD MONA. And we'll go through that in detail, but we've got variation, and then we have deviation, then we have magnetic dip, oscillation, the northerly turning errors, and then acceleration, deceleration errors, which is what this slide is specifically talking about, Okay, so the compass does have some weights in it to kind of compensate for these, but this is the primary reason why, because of all these errors, that we use the heading indicator, also known as the directional gyro, for most of it. All right, everybody, good job. Let's go ahead and take a look at a medical question here, and this is dealing, I always see people miss this one just because we're less familiar with it. All right, so to maintain your basic med privileges, you're required to complete the comprehensive medical examination checklist. Is it every 48 months, 24 months, or 12 months? So Mark, you just took it, the FAA private pilot exam. So you're saying that the test questions that we use align pretty well with the testing or the test that you saw? Thank you, Missy. All right, give you guys another 30 seconds here. And then 2 more questions. All right, that's good to know, Mark. Thanks. Nick, unfortunately, you can't change your answer. You're locked in, sir. Jacob, so Mark on YouTube said that they are almost all the same, is what his response was. So the test questions, I guess, in our database are pretty much aligned with it. They may change the words here and there, the potential answers. All right, everybody. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. We have very few members of the class getting this right, and it's to be expected. It's a very easy question, and unfortunately, this is just kind of a memorization thing at the end of the day. We only had 22% of the class with the correct answer, which is A. Most people are kind of thinking about this backwards, and majority of class actually answered B for 24 months. But when we're looking at basic med regulations, you are required to, there's 2 different requirements. There's one for 24 months, and then there's one for 48 months when we are looking at this. So the one for 24 months is specifically doing the, it's called the medical education course. And that's basically an online course that you have to take. And then every 48 months is basically where you're doing the checklist and the physical examination. So this is 2 parts. You basically have this checklist, and I'm going to use their abbreviation, which is CMEC, which is this up here. And that's the first component. And then you actually have the doctor portion, which is going to be the physical exam as well with some type of state licensed physician. So for the purposes of this, just remember that there are 2 different ones that you have to look at. Every 24 months, you have to take an online medical education course. And then every 48 months, you need to complete the checklist and then actually meet with, usually it'll be a primary care physician or someone similar to that to do the physical exam when we're looking at it. All right. All right, everybody, let's go ahead and take a look at our second to last question, which is once again dealing with our basic VFR weather minimums. So the basic VFR weather minimums for operating an aircraft within Class Delta airspace are, is it 500-foot ceiling and 1 statute mile of visibility, 1,000-foot ceiling and 3 statute miles of visibility, or is it clear of clouds and 2 miles of visibility? No problem, Nash. A lot of people have problems getting the student pilot license, just kind of going through the IACRA form. So we have a video coming out on it. We'll post it on YouTube once it's up, but it'll show you the entire process, including what the flight instructor has to do for you. right, give you guys another 30 seconds here. All right, everybody. So let's go ahead and take a look at the answer and see how everybody did here. So looking at the results, we've got 86% of the class with the correct answer. So good job, everybody. A couple people answered it incorrectly, but what we have when we're looking at our basic VFR weather minimums, and this is something you should kind of put to memory, is going to be 1,000-foot ceiling and 3 statute miles of visibility. So anything less than these numbers is basically going to be IFR conditions. Okay. Now, a lot of times people will ask, what is a ceiling? So remember, the ceiling is going to be the lowest of either the broken or overcast layer. Okay, so remember, there's different conditions in terms of once we get to weather. We have SKC, which is sky clear. Then we've got few clouds, and then we have scattered clouds. And the only thing that we consider in terms of a ceiling is only basically taking into account the broken or overcast layer. And when we're looking at it, it's the lowest of the broken and overcast layer. So when we're reading weather reports, they will tell us what type of, we don't have to figure out what type of clouds they are. They'll tell us whether it's few, scattered, broken, or overcast. And it's our responsibility to know what is the definition of a ceiling. And when we're looking at it, making sure that we meet those criteria in order to basically take off for VFR. Now, we haven't gone over this in the regulations section, but in addition to that, there is specific clearance requirements that we have to maintain per the regulations. And I'll show you this slide, which is why they chose the 1,000-foot ceiling. So if we were to look at this and we were in Class Echo airspace, so remember, inside of Class Echo airspace, it's 3 statute miles of visibility. And if we were to think of our little cloud here, it's 1,000 above a cloud, 500 feet below a cloud, and 2,000 feet horizontally. And that's in Class Echo airspace. So there's another FAR out there in the Federal Aviation Regulations that basically will give us a minimum safe altitude or a minimum altitude that we can fly. And in uncongested areas, basically where we're not flying over a large city or basically settlement, we have to be 500 feet above whatever the terrain is. And that's 500 feet above whatever the highest obstacle is. So the reason why 1,000 feet works is if we're in Class Echo surface-based airspace, as shown in this example, we obviously have to abide by the 3 statute miles, but we're meeting the requirement of that Federal Aviation Regulation that says we need to be 500 feet from basically in unpopulated or uncongested areas. And if there's a cloud at 1,000 feet, then we're still 500 feet below it. So you can see there's not much room for margin, but they do kind of put us smack dab in between both of those locations. Okay, so that's kind of where they came up with the basic VFR weather minimums. And that is kind of just the history behind it. All right, last thing we want to talk about, and some people were jumping ahead, so I grabbed this question just because I saw it. An airport's rotating beacon, go ahead and change it here. An airport's rotating beacon operated during daylight hours indicates what? Is it A, there are obstructions on the airport, B, the weather at the airport located in Class Delta airspace is below basic VFR weather minimums, or is it C, the air traffic control tower is not in operation? Thanks, Cody. You guys like the new CFI video we put out? All right, give you guys another 20 seconds or so. And then we've got one more. Oh, Annette, write it down on a piece of paper, Annette. All right, everybody, so let's go ahead and take a look at the answer. We had about 13% of the class with A, 51% of the class with B, and 34% of the class with C. Okay, so, all right, an airport's rotating beacon operated during daylight hours indicates what? So the correct answer, which is what majority of the class had, 51% of the class, it's actually going to be B. So this is the correct answer. And when we look at the weather minimums, so we just talked about the weather minimums for VFR, 1,000-foot ceiling and 3 statute miles visibility. If there is a control tower, the control tower will have an airport beacon, and the airport beacon is only normally on from sunset to sunrise unless the weather is below VFR conditions, okay? So it is not just in class Delta, it would be similar in class Bravo, Charlie, or Delta with an operating control tower. So remember, the airport beacon, not every airport has one, but it is listed on the sectional. It's a little tiny star above the airport on the actual FAA sectionals, the visual ones. And remember that they are color-coded when we look at them, so what we're usually looking for is going to be a white and green light, and they are alternating. And then they also have variations of that we'll talk about a little bit more. So if it happens to be a water airport, it's yellow and white. Heliports are green, and then we call this a dual peak. So there's a yellow and a white flash, and then military airports are dual peak white, meaning that it's white, white, and then green on the other side. So they operate normally from sunset to sunrise or anytime the weather is less than VFR at towered airports, and towered airports would effectively be Bravo, Charlie, Delta airports. Okay, so that's how we answer it. All right, very, very last FAA test question, then I'll open it up to any questions you may or may not have. Let's go ahead and take a look at this one. Except in Alaska, during what time period should lighted position lights be displayed on an aircraft? Is it A, end of evening civil twilight to the beginning of morning civil twilight, B, 1 hour after sunset to 1 hour before sunrise, or C, sunset to sunrise? Stephen Reynolds, the correct answer is B. I think it was just a typo on that. Just go over the answer that I reviewed with you. You guys another 30 seconds here. Nash on YouTube, the answer is not when air traffic control is out. The correct answer there is B. For that one, it was the weather at the airport located in class Delta airspace is below basic VFR. So those airport beacons will operate regardless of weather, anytime from sunset to sunrise. And then during daylight hours, they operate at control towers only if the weather is less than VFR minimums. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at this last one here. And we've got about 55% of the class answering A, 22% with B, and 22% with C. All right. So the way that the aircraft position lights, or when they actually have to be on in this circumstance, the aircraft position lights actually have to be displayed from sunset to sunrise. So the correct answer is C. A lot of people were answering, looks like A, just because of the word civil twilight, but A is incorrect because that applies specifically to logging nighttime flight. And B is incorrect because this is actually for the purposes of logging currency for your night takeoff and landings. All right, so sunset to sunrise is going to be when we want those position lights on. We will talk about this more on Monday as well, but the aircraft lights, so remember the position lights are the green, the red light, and then there's a white light on the tail of the aircraft. So as per the regulation, anytime that official nighttime for airplanes is going to be considered from sunset to sunrise, no person may operate an aircraft during this period unless it has lighted position lights. Okay, so those are what we consider the position lights. So good job, everybody, with that. What we're going to do is, if anybody has any more questions, whether they are course related or anything else, I will stick around and see what I can do to answer them. But other than that, I appreciate everybody for hanging out on their Sunday here. And what we're going to be doing tomorrow is we will be covering federal aviation regulations for the private pilot ground school. So we hope to see you there. And that starts at 5 p.m. Pacific time. All right, so with that, thank you again, everybody, for sharing your Sunday with us. I hope everybody has a safe and productive week coming up, and I will stick around if you have any more questions, okay? You shall see on Monday, Joyce. We will be covering some of this stuff on Monday as well. Thanks again, everybody. Thank you again, Mr. Travis and Cody out there and Missy for answering those questions. All right, a couple questions here that I'm seeing. So I'll answer a very easy one for Joyce. Joyce is asking on the airspeed indicator, VS0 or VSO means the stalling speed of flaps extended. So yes, that is correct. So it is a certain configuration. It's basically gear down if it's not a fixed gear, and then it's flaps full or flaps fully extended. Flaps up is VS1. So that's basically your clean configuration in that circumstance. Okay. Bart, let me write that down and I'll add it for tomorrow since I promised to show you a video on the strings for the stall. Okay, I will add that to the list here, Bart. All right, so going back to Sam's question here, could you please show us again how to find Class Golf airspace, the shaded blue that has 14,500 ceiling on SkyVector, and does Golf ever extend all the way to Class Alpha? So Golf will start at the surface and it has the ability to go up to 14,500 feet, but that's the highest it'll ever go. If we were to go explore on, let's go ahead and open up another window here, and we're going to go to SkyVector. So like I said, we have very, very few opportunities in the United States here where, go ahead and open this up and I'll share my screen here. So this is dealing with Class Golf up to 14,500. So looking at SkyVector, what we have is, this is obviously a sectional chart in Boston. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat a little bit. So I am going to go to the en route charts, which is for our instrument flying. And the reason why I do that is that it's the fastest way to identify Class Golf airspace up to 14,500. So if you look over here, pretty much it's all either blue, white, or green, okay? What I'm looking for is brown, a large brown color, which is usually located along, the border. And then there's also one right there. That's the one I'm looking for. So you see that big brown spot in the middle of the map right there? That is a Class Golf airspace. And the reason why I'm showing you this on an IFR map is if I zoom out, there are very, very few brown spots located in the United States. There's a couple up here towards Idaho and Montana. But let's go back down to that one that we were looking at before. Okay, so this happens to be inside of a MOA, which is a military operating area. And this is what it looks like on IFR charts. Now, if I go to the actual Albuquerque chart where this exists, the way that I can identify that it's Class Golf is that inside of these bounds where the blue box is, kind of looks like a trapezoid, if you will, everything inside of there is Class Golf up to 14,500 feet, okay, which means it's uncontrolled airspace. So that's how you can identify it. And like I said, it's becoming less. You're able to find these less and less over the years. If you looked at older maps, let's say, I've got a couple charts from Oregon from the 1980s that some friends gave me. Pretty much the entire state is covered with these blue boxes because the radar wasn't very prevalent and it had a hard time basically capturing traffic. So most of the state used to be considered uncontrolled. Now, if you look at Oregon, there are no areas where there's class golf in up to 14,500 in that state. Okay, so that's how we identify that. Does that answer that, Sam? All right, a couple other questions that we have from Robert. Is a Magneto bad P-lead situation a no-go? Usually we're checking that at the very end of the flight, Robert, so we usually don't look at it from that point. Let's see here. Renson, take care. Mark, plane is coming along. It's been stripped. I think we're just waiting for it to be painted at this point. So it's going through its own process. All right, Bart, I said that I would promise you that video, so I will give you that video with the strings. Vic, have a good one. All right, John wants to review the airspace triangle a little bit more. So is there anything in particular you want to go over the entire airspace triangle, John? WW is asking, there's some rumors on the internet that the FAA is changing their questions. I don't think that should be any surprise to anybody. They're always consistently testing new questions and trying new things. So it's kind of like an ever-evolving process. I think the majority of the test questions that have changed so far are going to be on the instrument exam, more so than the private. Q&A on Sunday. Selfie, if you want to advise me a little bit more on what you mean by sport pilot. I will check that. Okay, so John is asking for the nighttime requirement for the triangle, and then I'll get back to some of these other questions as well. Okay. All right, so with the nighttime requirement, what we're looking for when we talk about the airspace triangle here, and I will go to this page. All right, so when we have an airspace triangle, really the only thing that applies for nighttime is in class golf. So I had you guys draw an airspace triangle that looks something similar to this, and the only ones that I'm going to talk about are right here and right here, which is class golf. So in this one, we basically had a moon or nighttime. That class golf is basically from the surface up to, and this is 10,000 feet MSL. If it's at night, it reverted back to the 3152, which was 3 statute miles, 1,000 above, 500 below, and 2,000 feet horizontally. Okay. The other thing that we also had was class golf was kind of had a different weather requirement. So this is basically the nighttime side, and then this is the daytime. Other requirement that we had in class golf was 1 statute mile of visibility, clear of clouds, and that was good until 1,200 feet AGL. And then between 1,200 feet to 10,000 feet, it was 1 statute mile clear of clouds, 1,000 above, 500 below, and 2,000 feet horizontally. So the way that that breaks down is for day golf, and I'll do it like this. Surface to 1,200 feet AGL is going to be 1 statute mile clear of clouds. From basically 1,200 feet to 10,000 feet during the day, then it is basically 1 statute mile of visibility. And we've got, I'm going to put 1,000, or I'll do it this way. 1 statute, I'll just do it like a cloud if that makes it a little bit easier. 1 statute mile of visibility, 1,000 above, 500 below, and 2,000 feet horizontally. So that's the day requirement. The nighttime requirement for class golf is basically it reverts to the normal 3152. And this is basically going to be from the surface up to 10,000 feet. So if you have a little cloud here, it's 3 statute miles of visibility, 1,000 above, 500 below, and 2,000 feet horizontally from the cloud. Okay, so that basically takes care of, it's the only one that has a day or nighttime requirement. So if you draw it out, just remember practice, practice, practice on those. All right. All right, let's go back to the other test questions that you guys were asking for as well. Bart, take care. I'm thinking that the one in Arizona, maybe the actual one. Yep, Sam, the class golf in Arizona is probably one of the few that are all the way up to 14,500. Take care, Leo. Under VOR, is the plane's position always opposite the heading? Not necessarily. It depends on if you're tracking inbound or outbound, Osan. Missy has that one. Najib is asking about retiring from the Department of Defense and basically moving from a desk job over to flying at an age of 36. So like I tell people, a lot of people always ask me, is, 30s too late? Is 40s too late? Is 50s too late? And I still say the same answer. Nope, you can still be a professional pilot. You can still go to the airlines. I have trained students that were in the upper range of 50s. They got all their licenses, they became instructors, and then they went to the airlines. And they knew that being, coming into the airlines at 60, they weren't going to have a full career, right? They weren't going to be able to fly a 747 or really maybe even make it to captain, but they wanted to fulfill that lifelong dream, so they didn't really care. And a lot of them just went to regionals, and some of them became captains at the end before they had to retire when they're 65. So even people in their 30s, that's still a great time to start. There are some people that start earlier, but like myself, I didn't really get back into it until I got to my 30s as well. So I don't think it's a bad thing whatsoever. All right, someone was asking what was it? It was specifically asking about reviewing the whole mixture thing, okay? And I'll see if I can answer that. So one person was asking something along the lines, and I think I lost the question here. If you want to ask it again, throw it in the chat, and I'll see if I can do it, since some of these are getting a little bit lost. All right, Ali is asking an instrument question, and he wants to, let's see if we can pull this one up for you. All right, so this is switching gears to the instrument side of the house. So let's go ahead and take a look at this approach plate that we want to find. So in this case, this is going to be for Aspen. What is the airport code for Aspen, Ali? Because that's a waypoint right there. All right, Aspen Airport, ASE is the airport code. All right, so let me go ahead and find this real quick. It's ASE. Or it's KASE, sorry. K, Alpha Sierra Echo. All right, so here is Aspen Airport in the middle of the mountains here. And let's go ahead and take a look at this approach. So this approach that you want to look at is the localizer DME approach. Go down to the very bottom and pull it up. All right, localizer DME Echo approach. All right, so let's take a look at this. All right, so switching over to instrument stuff. If anybody wants to hang around or has any more questions, I'll be happy to answer them after this. But let's see if we can. Do you have any specific questions with it, Ali, in terms of the actual approach itself? So with this approach, obviously, we are required to have, it says dual VHF navigation receivers required. And in this circumstance, we have to have a localizer, and we also have to have distance measuring equipment. Now, if we have a GPS installed, then remember a GPS will suffice for distance measuring equipment. And then remember that because it just has the echo there and there's no associated runway with it, that means that this is a circling approach only. Whether it's Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, or Echo, these are just basically iterations or changes within the different approach plates as a whole. Now we can see here that the localizer, which is the IASE, which is the localizer actual frequency, which is 111.515, that is. And when we're looking at this, this has no voice communications. We have the final approach course. Let's see. You were asking two different questions here. So this is a little bit more challenging one, as you can see. So when we have this, we are looking at the back course. So the back course outbound is normal sensing. So the question that he has is when you're shooting or executing this approach, and let's say you're coming in and you're doing the normal approach on the 151 degree in, which is the localizer for the airport, okay? So as you come in the event that you didn't see the runway and you needed to do a missed approach at CAG, which looks like it's roughly 4 DME away from the actual airport, or the localizer in that case, then what they're having you do is they are effectively having you fly the back course outbound in order to get to your missed approach point. Now, this is a back course. It is a localizer, but because you're flying the reverse of it, it actually is giving you correct sensing. If you're flying to it, meaning you're going to that localizer in the opposite direction, then it would be reverse sensing. Okay, so they're just reminding you that because you're flying the back course in the opposite direction of the localizer, it is correct sensing at that point. Okay, and that's the reason why it's normal sensing. Does that make sense, Ali? So when we look at this, it's kind of unusual that it goes from a localizer front course and then you basically do a localizer back course. But if we were to look at the actual step downs here, as you can see with this is a very, very steep descent gradient. So if I kind of zoom in on the profile view here and look at this, remember that from the Maltese cross, which is indicating that this is a non-precision approach, which is actually at the dope intersection, which is 7.1 DME away from the ASC localizer. From that point down to the runway, look at that descent angle. That descent angle is 6.59 degrees. So you're going to have to really hustle it down in a very, very short period of time before you get to your missed approach. Now, this missed approach is identified by it's specifically identified by the 4DME. You'll notice that there's no time, because if we look at the airport diagram, normally if it's a timed approach, underneath the airport diagram, there'd be a timing section, and there's not. Now, Ollie's last question here as well is, why are the minimums so high? So if you look at it, category A is basically for aircraft with approach speeds up to 90 knots, and then category B is for aircraft 120 knots. So this is telling us, let's assume we're in the slower category. So this means that we can go down to 9,840 feet and we need 3 statute miles of visibility. The 2003 is telling us that we will be 2,003 feet above the ground when we are at that missed approach altitude, okay? Now, this airport as a whole, so keep in mind, 98.4 airport elevation is 7,837 feet. So he's asking, why are we, almost 2,000 feet high? And the reason why is it has to do with density altitude, right? If they let you go down any further to the airport, you will probably not be able to make the missed approach. And in this case, keep in mind that the missed approach, it wants you to climb back up to 14,000 feet, right? So if we look at that missed approach instructions, I'm going to go to the very top here, climbing right turn to 14,000 feet on a heading of 300. And then on the IPKN localizer northwest course, it gives you certain instructions to do the hold. And when we're already at 10,000 feet, first off, most general aviation aircraft are not going to be able to climb for this missed approach. And they won't allow us to go any lower just because the missed approach climb gradient is probably not going to be doable. This is the same case in South Lake Tahoe. If you were to look at the South Lake Tahoe approach, the missed approach is almost 1,500 or 2,000 feet above the airport, just because of the fact that it is the density altitude that kind of does not allow you to go any lower. Okay? Does that make sense, Ali? All right. Was there any other questions? I know we kind of diverged there into IFR stuff. Sarah, you said you had one last question. Let's see here. Osan was asking, how do you find the plane's position to the VOR? I've got a video that I'll put out a little bit later this evening on YouTube. You can check that out. It's like a 30-minute thing, and I go through the actual steps to do so. All right, SXF, Sierra X-Ray Foxtrot on YouTube is asking, how do you recommend getting paper-based charts, flight log, etc. to be organized in the cockpit? So I actually use an iPad for that. And of course my iPad is dead next to me, but I use ForeFlight for all of my paper stuff. And I do keep copies of paper charts for local airports and those types of things, just in the event that my iPad decided to die. But with the iPad and ForeFlight, I basically have my flight plan in there. I've got all of my approach plates in there, and you can basically put them into little binders and sections so you can organize them. And I have my weather packets in there. So everything is basically loaded up in the iPad for me. And then I've got my backup as well. Remember that if you do have an electronic flight bag, you need to have a backup. In my case, I have a phone as a backup. And then in my experience, because I did my IFR, I did my instrument rating a couple years ago, and I remember I was using ForeFlight a lot, and I was staring at the approach plate, but I wasn't staring at it to read the approach plate. I was staring at it to see where the airplane was geo-referenced on the actual plate. And the examiner reached over and he turned off my iPad. He says, "You just lost your iPad." So from that point, I passed the check ride, luckily, because I shot that approach, that VOR approach, so much that I memorized the step downs. That was the only way I could get through it. So from that point, he kind of imparted to me that I basically once a year, I'll print out the local approaches for the airports around Camarillo where we fly. And I actually laminate them and keep them on like a little key ring in my flight bag, just in the event that, you know, because these are probably primarily where I'm going to fly locally, and I've always had those with me. But other than that, if I'm going to a new airport, I usually kind of organize everything inside of those binders, looking at them in ForeFlight. And keep in mind, you also have Garmin Pilot, and you also have FlyQ, and there's a lot of other resources as well. Some people love paper, though. If you've got paper, there are a million different little crafty inventions. You can look on sporties.com where they kind of organize it into little binders and sections for you. Either way, that's what it is. I know, I was bad, Missy. I was cheating a little bit. FAA, does FAA still require paper charts to be in possession while flying the aircraft? That is a negative. If you have the electronic flight bag, the electronic version will suffice, okay? They have to be up-to-date charts, though, so just make sure that you've downloaded the correct ones. Joyce is asking, how do you recover from a stall if you start spinning downward? So, Joyce, I'm assuming that when you're asking that question, you have gone into a fully developed, or you're probably in an incipient spin, which means that the aircraft is actually starting to rotate around you. So when you're looking at that, there's a couple acronyms, and remember, you always want to use whatever the manufacturer specifies. But the acronyms that we use for that are going to be PAIR and REAP. So most Cessnas out there will use PAIR. Most folks, you want to memorize this anyways. And then our friends in the Piper world will use REAP, R-E-A-P. Same thing, just in a different order. So what it is in the event you get into a spin, you want to go power to idle because you don't want to fly faster towards the ground. Your ailerons, probably going to spell it wrong, ailerons neutral. Okay. Rudder in the opposite direction of the spin because you want to stop spinning. So you're going to use your rudder, not your ailerons. And then elevator, full forward. Okay. So remember that even if you are spinning towards the ground or basically in a spin, and what ends up happening is no matter how bad it looks and how severe it is, most of the time you're pointed pretty much straight down when we're looking at these things. So when we are actually in a spin in this circumstance, so if we have an aircraft that is basically nose down and we're basically spinning one way or the other, we still need to break the stall. Even if it looks like how is it stalled, you have to push it down even further forward. Okay. So like I said, depending on your manufacturer, you always want to go with whatever your manufacturer states, but Cessnas are generally the pair. The Pipers are generally going to be the Reap, which is basically the same thing, except they start moving. They basically say rudder opposite is first, and then it's elevator full forward, ailerons neutral, and then power. Okay, so do whatever your manufacturer states. You can also eventually do advanced training if you want to practice stalls. As instructors, we all have to go through the spin recovery and actually do spins as well. So it is good practice if you ever have additional time to do it. You're welcome, Robert. All right, what other questions do we have here before we call it a day? Joyce, does that answer the question in regards to the spin? You're welcome, ma'am. All right, well, Joyce is asking, are the airspace classifications universal or just national? So keep in mind that the majority of airspace out there is actually fairly universal. For the purposes of ICAO. ICAO is the national or the international body that basically does all the aviation regulations. Every airspace has their slight nuances, but they're fairly the same. So, for example, Class Alpha in the United States is at 18,000 feet, and in different parts of countries, it could be a little bit higher than that as well. Some countries have it starting at 20,000 feet, but like I said, it will give you a pretty good sense, and then if you're flying to different countries, you could look at the nuances. It's the same thing with the airspeed limits. In Canada, for example, you can't go over 200 knots within 10 nautical miles of a major airport, and we don't have that regulation in the United States. So there are some, you have to kind of compare and contrast the regulations. All right, well, other than that, everybody, thank you again for sharing your Sunday afternoon with us. I'll go ahead and post that VOR video a little bit later. I will get you the stall video as well. I'll share that with the next class on Monday. Other than that, I hope everybody has a fantastic weekend. Stay safe out there, and we will see everybody a bit later.